Welcome back to Teatorials, and thanks for joining us for week 9. This week we are looking at brewing tea. To be truthful, when one starts considering the brewing of tea, it's a bit like opening a can of worms. There are definite industry standards and recommendations, but it would be unfair not to recognise that often people have their own distinct way of making their very personal cup of tea. Years of practice, generations of family advice, aspiring to how your relatives brewed it so well, all leading to very personal tea brewing results. Let's begin with a few general recommendations that can act as a guide to helping you perfect the art of brewing the perfect cuppa. Choosing your tea. Well, this is very much up to you. We would always recommend buying loose tea, and be aware that the better quality the tea you buy, the more likely you are to have a great tea drinking experience. Storing your tea. The very first step, keep your tea airtight, particularly if the tea is scented or flavoured. When buying loose tea, the best idea is to transfer your tea to a tea caddy immediately after purchase. This helps the tea to retain all its wonderful flavour. Keeping your tea at room temperature, away from direct sunlight, will also keep the flavours fresh. Water. The more oxygen present in the water you use, the more flavour you can release from the tea leaves. This is the reason why you ought to draw fresh water from the tap each time, rather than reboiling the kettle over and over again. The temperature of the water is also crucial. As we have mentioned before, water just off the boil is great for black tea, but with green tea and white tea, it's important to use water around 80 degrees Celsius to avoid spoiling the leaves. How much tea? Often, the old sayings are the best. A teaspoon of tea per cup you are brewing. Your relatives might have said, add 1 teaspoon extra for the pot. This works well in larger pots, but for a 2 to 4 cup pot, 1 spoon per cup is plenty of tea. Most people recognise 1 teaspoon of tea per 8 fluid ounces of water as a standard. Heat the pot and cup. It is worth pouring a little boiling water into both the pot and cup, swirling them around and emptying them to heat your brewing and drinking equipment. This will help your drink stay warm. Add water to tea. We would always recommend pouring the water over the leaves. Adding the leaves to water never seems to release the flavour and start the brewing process effectively. How long should I brew the tea? If you were to use 3 minutes brewing time as a general rule, that should work out well for most teas. We would normally suggest 2 minutes is long enough for green tea. Herbal teas can generally be left longer and will not turn bitter. For example, rooibos might be left for 7 or 8 minutes and still be very pleasant to taste. Most tea will have become quite bitter after that length of time. Remove the leaves. Traditional brewing methods mean the leaves remain in the pot after you have poured the first cup. The benefit of brewing tea in the pot is that the leaves will have more space to infuse. However, our preferred method is to use tea serving equipment available to us nowadays to remove the leaves after a few minutes. Many types of tea can then be used for further infusions, particularly green tea. Taste your brew. Always take a moment to analyse what you've made. Slurp it, swirl it around your mouth, and consider if your brew is right for you. At the end of the day, it is you that has to drink it. Use your experiences to shape your brewing methods in the future. There you have it, a wee guide to brewing tea. As we mentioned at the beginning, tea is a very personal thing. Everyone has their own ways for brewing tea. For those of us serving tea at work, if you are making the switch to serving loose tea, these are good guidelines to follow. See you next week.